Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite little cameras, and that is the GoPro. Many of you have been asking me when I'm going to make a video about tips with filming with the GoPro, or when I'm going to be talking more about photography stuff, and so now I'm going to do it. Sorry I'm so long in between videos, but let's jump right into it. Even if you're not interested in GoPros, you might still find this video interesting, so I ask that you stick around. And if you're new here, I would love if you subscribe and hit the little bell button so you don't miss any notifications. So let's get into the GoPro. Now I'm just going to be sharing a handful of tips and tricks for using a GoPro. Now before we talk about those, I want to list a little bit the pros and cons of using a GoPro for a video camera. So the question is, can you vlog with this? Does it actually make a good vlogging camera? A camera to take with you to like record family vacations and family moments. In the end of this video, I'm going to include a little family trip that we took to a farm show, and all I took along was this GoPro, and so you'll get to see kind of how it looks when I'm simply using this to film and see if it's something that you would like in your tool bag for video or camera gear. Now, one of the first benefits of the GoPro is its ease of use. I'm telling you, this thing is so user-friendly. You can just hit the button and go. You don't have to worry about settings, and it normally does a really good job. This is the GoPro Hero 8, by the way, and it has a feature where you can just simply press the record button when it's turned off, and it will turn on and immediately start filming. That is really cool, and then when you press it again, it's going to stop recording and turn back off. Obviously, little GoPros are so tough, like they're almost indestructible, not quite, but you can take them in water. They're a sports camera, and so they're built tough, and they're built for dropping and jolts and bangs, and look at how tiny this thing is. Absolutely love it. It just fits in your coat pocket. It's almost like you have nothing with you. Now, some of the pros that I'm mentioning only go with the GoPro Hero 8, and one of those would be the incredible slow motion it has. You can go up to 240 frames per second. I think that's the highest, which makes for that extremely buttery smooth slow motion, which I absolutely love. So there's a couple things that I always look for when I'm looking for a camera. Number one, of course, would be image quality. Number two would be image stabilization, because if your video footage is all shaky and jittery, there's really no point in watching it. It makes you almost sick to watch it. And so the better image stabilization is within a camera, the more smooth your shots look and the better quality you have in general. And that is one thing the GoPro Hero 8 does so well. And yes, let's address the elephant in the room. I am using a cup as a stand for my mic. Excuse me, I'm running out of equipment. I'm not really, I'm just too lazy to find something to set it on. So this is my mic on a cup. I'm a mom. This is how we'd roll. Anyway, one more thing that I love about GoPros, that is all the attachments that come with it. And we'll talk about these later. Another thing that I love about the GoPro Hero 8 especially is they built in the little mounting feet at the bottom. See this? And so when you're done with them, you just plop them back in, and there's no need for a case. Like some of my other GoPros, one second, needed to have like a case like this to put the GoPro into so it was waterproof, and also a different case so that it would mount onto attachments like so. But this one, you don't need any case to go underwater unless you're diving like below 30 feet, and you're ready to mount it on anything, and when you're done, you just pop them back in and throw it in your pocket. It's awesome. All right, now that we have the positives out of the way, but let's talk about the negatives. For one, you don't really have a whole lot of control over your settings. You have some control, but you're always going to have a wide field of view, so you don't really have any zoom reach. That's a downfall. Limited settings. So for instance, if you know about depth of field where you like to have something more in focus and the background blurry, you can't control any of that with the GoPro. It's basically everything stays in focus with the GoPro, which can be a plus and a minus because you don't really have to worry about filming yourself because you're in focus, but so is everything else. And it's also not really the best thing to have in low light. Low light video and photo gets pretty grainy. The audio on this one is improved. It moved the audio port to the outside for the GoPro Hero 8 rather than on the top, which definitely helps, but as most cameras, in-camera audio isn't always the best. With the pros and cons out of the way, let's jump into some tips for using a GoPro. Now the tips that I'm going to be sharing are basically general tips for all video, just to make a better video and more compelling story. But at the end, I am going to be specifically giving a more technical tip on how to better use your GoPro to get better footage out of it in the long run. So the first thing that I want to talk about is you need to think about your story. What's your video about? And I know when people told me this at first, I was like, yeah, you know, that takes too much time to think about a story. But really, what is a story? It's a beginning, it's a middle, and an end. So a very easy illustration would be if you're going on a family vacation, don't just start filming when you show up at the hotel. Like, kind of film the process as you get there. Maybe just a few seconds of packing, a few seconds of walking out the door, getting in the car, driving down the road. There's so many little details that are a part of the trip, a part of the experience, that makes it fun to watch. And as you as a viewer are watching this, you kind of get the process. Okay, we're packing for a trip. Now we're leaving. We're driving down the road. You see the airport. Maybe you just film a little bit out the window. I'm not talking about long. I'm talking about mere seconds of video clips. And you don't have to do every little detail of your trip, but just kind of have a sequence to your story. You have a beginning. You're starting out your trip. You have a middle. You're at your location. And then, of course, story also has an end. And you want to wrap that up. Maybe it's just packing up to leave. Maybe you're sad to leave. And all a part of the story, I would definitely encourage you to talk to the camera. I know it feels so awkward. It took me a long time to be comfortable in front of a camera and to talk naturally. And I still have to work at that, especially when I'm in crowds. But it adds so much to your story, even if it's just for your own family video. And you add those storytelling narratives and you weave it through your videos. It just makes the complete video so much more compelling. Now, another thing, when you're looking at a scene and you're trying to decide what do you want to film, this is one of the harder things about being a filmmaker and trying to figure out what you want to film. You know, you look at a scene and there's just so much to take in, especially if you're in a beautiful place and you just want to show everything. And that's kind of the downfall of video. You cannot put the wonder and the beauty of a scene as you see it down into a video, because often videos kind of bring out the flawed side of things. Like if you just step back and take a video, you don't see the splendor and the beauty of it just by taking a plain old video. You have to look for the details, look for the beautiful things, and then also see the not so beautiful things. When you're looking at a scene to film, you yourself are kind of seeing the beauty of it all, but there may be some glaring ugliness in that will really show up in the photo, but you're not really taking notice of it in real life. And so it's a really good idea to just take a look at it and decide what do you want in your film and what do you want out of it, and then just try to make sure that when you're videoing, you crop out the ugly parts. Maybe it's trash on the beach, or something as simple as when I was shooting weddings. If you're taking pictures of a spread on the table, say a fork is crooked, some things are off center, maybe everything is beautiful, but then there's this little plastic container full of those little plastic containers of creamer. That just completely takes away from the classy look of the photo, and so you have to kind of adjust your scene, move out the stuff that distracts, make everything organized and neat, and then take your video. And that applies to so many areas of life. Not like you have to go clean everything up wherever you are if you're on vacation, but just remember to look for what you really want to film and what you don't want to film as well. Another thing that really helps in this whole thing is when I look at a scene, I like to take a couple different shots. Now with a GoPro, some of these aren't quite as possible, but you can still do them. It's just simply because you always have a wide angle. But let's just say you got this lovely little beach house out on the beach, and you started off with a wide shot of waves, sand, maybe you have a drone shot of everything. Obviously we're talking about GoPros, so no drones. But you have a wide shot, and then you narrow into someone walking up to that beach house, and you might shoot a very close detailed shot of their feet walking. Maybe they're holding something in their hand and you just want to get a real close-up of their hand holding flip-flops, something like that. And maybe your next clip is them cropped from chest to head, and then you step back further and you have a full body shot of them. Like if you think about different ways you can film the same scene to add to the story. So I usually think wide shot, closer up shot, and then a detailed shot. So those are kind of the three things that I always try to get within a scene, especially when I'm trying to do a nice video. Take for instance my son riding his bike. There's various details that I can add to it, more than just taking a video of, oh, there he goes, and quickly turn it on and just follow him as he's running. Think about the interesting things, like when I get older, Things like his chubby little hands on the handlebars are going to like make me so like, oh, you know, because just those little details. And so just come in close, get his hands on the handlebars, get his feet running away on the pavement, get a sideways shot of maybe just half of him and half the bike and run along with him. Maybe it's just a shot of his face laughing, and then you have a wider shot with just the bike. And then maybe you have a really wide shot where he's like on the lane, kind of disappearing out the lane. And so there you have a handful of various different things. They all relate to the same story, but they make it so much more beautiful, and it tells a better story because you have so many details within that shot. Along with that, I want to talk about shooting at different angles. So the standard thing that most people do is you just start filming at standing height. Videos of children, you know, you're videoing them and you're pointing down because you're taller than them, and so the children are looking up at you. The majority of people turn on their video camera and just film from standing height. This gets really old and very boring very quickly. While there's definitely a place for that, I would suggest trying different angles, especially when you're filming smaller subjects like my son. He's small. He's half my size. So the trick is to get your camera down to his level, and it makes the viewer suddenly feel like they're a part of his life instead of like us looking down on him. It's those little tweaks to your filming that make a huge difference in how your video actually looks in the end. I also love, even if it's not a small person, I also love setting a camera very low to the grounds and just getting people walking. It just gives a different perspective. You can also shoot way up high and shoot down. There's just different angles to shoot with, so don't just be stuck with standing position and just pointing at whatever you're interested in. Think about your shot. All right, another quick tip would be adding layers to your shot. Let's say you're taking a picture of a mountain landscape. What makes that so much more interesting is if you have things in the foreground and then things in the background, and then you have your mountain landscape. Note in this video, we have the grasses in the foreground, and then sort of in the middle of the shot, we have these green, beautiful hills, and then in the background, we have our snowy mountain peaks. Here's another example. Grasses, rocks, and then in the distance we see the clouds rolling in and the houses there. And then here we have another interesting shot where we have skis and a snowboard sort of in the foreground. In the background we have mountains, and then right there in the middle we sort of see the ski lifts coming through and the skier just standing there. And another good thing to note with this video is how he is framed in between the poles, and that leads me to my next point where we talk about framing shots. Framing shots is one of my favorite ways to take pictures and videos. And a good example would be shooting through a tree. Often tree branches have leaves that create sort of like a frame, and if you can take those leaves and place them on the outside of the frame of your video or photo, and then whatever you're filming, your subject, if it's people, you have them placed within that frame. It just really adds a beautiful, nice touch to your photos, your videos. And along with that as well would be revealing shots. Maybe you want to reveal something beautiful and you're behind a wall and you slowly bring your camera out from behind that wall and you reveal a beautiful scenery, or maybe a couple walking somewhere. Whatever it is, revealing shots are another fun way to spice up your videos. Now we have all these different things in our tool bags. We know we should frame shots. We know that we shouldn't always just film from a standing position. We know that we should pre-think about what we're shooting and not just point and go. We understand that layering, having more things in the foreground and in the background, gives more of a compelling shot. We know that story is important, that a video should have some kind of story, and if you can talk on the video, that would definitely be much more preferable as well. But now let's talk a little bit about motion and different ways you can film to make it interesting. If you like more cinematic shots, there's a couple tips that I have. And that would be to never change motion. When you're filming a subject, let's say you're walking towards something, don't start walking towards them like this and then suddenly walk that way unless you're just kind of doing a casual vlog style. But if you want to have a beautiful sequence of videos, maybe to music, you want something cinematic, always just keep whatever range of motion you're doing the same, whether you're going forward, whether you're going backwards, whether you're going side to side. Always stick to that movement and don't break away from that. So there's a couple different ways. You can move forward towards your subject or follow your subject. You can move backwards. Maybe you have a close-up of your subject and you want to do sort of a revealing shot. You can go side to side with something, sort of like it's on a dolly. You can also do a pan movement where you're like panning with something. You can tilt. You know, maybe you're tilting, doing another reveal where you're tilting down and you just slowly come up and you're following something. You could also orbit around something. If you're walking, you just come around an object and orbit around it, so to speak. So these are various different motions that you can use, and there's many more. So first think about a subject and then think about a motion relating to that subject. And then later when you come to edit things, you have more of a concise flow to your story. And there's so much more you could dive into here, but we're trying to keep it simple, so we'll stop at that. Now I have one more tip before we jump into a more technical side with the GoPro, and that is when you take your videos to edit them, don't just throw them all together and call it good. I would encourage you to pick out the interesting parts and leave the rest go. Now GoPros are such handy little tools, and I definitely think that the GoPro Hero 8 is one of the best you can buy. I would definitely recommend it. I'll have links below if you're interested. You can buy so many attachments for it, little tripods, an extendable arm that can turn into a tripod, and a selfie stick, and I believe it floats and everything else. I'm going to have links to most of this stuff below. Chest mounts, mouth mounts, slant mounts, dash mounts, head mounts, and here I actually just recently purchased this for a trip coming up, wink wink. You know I've been talking a lot about the beach lately, so maybe there's a reason. I bought one of these domes where you put the GoPro in, and you've probably all seen those water shots where you can see halfway below the water and halfway above the water. That comes from one of these handy guys. And then there is also a dual battery charger you can buy where you can charge 2 batteries at once instead of simply charging your GoPro, which is handy. But it's this last thing that I want to talk about, and it has to do with more of a technical side of GoPros, and this one especially goes with the GoPro Hero 8. It's very handy, and what it is ND filters. I modified the inside of this a little bit to fit my needs, but it comes with 3 different ND filters, which an ND filter is basically just sunglasses for your GoPro. So you snap this little piece on the front of your GoPro. Your ND filters, or your sunglasses, simply snap on the front because they're magnetic. It's super, super handy. Now, why do you need an ND filter? Here we're going to get a little bit into more of the technical side of things. There's a general rule when you're taking video, and that is that you have a frame rate and a shutter speed, and they should always work together. So your frame rate means how many times is your camera taking a picture every second. The standard cinematic look is 24 frames per second, which means your camera's taking 24 pictures every second. You have 60 frames a second, 120 frames per second, and 240 frames per second on this little guy. So basically, when you want higher frame rates, like 60 or 120 frames per second, basically what that means is taking that many more photos every second. So later, if you want to have slow motion and you want it to be that perfectly smooth slow motion, you're going to be able to take your 120 frames and slow it down to 24 frames per second, and you're still getting 24 frames per second in your edit, but it's super, super slow because it took all those frames and slowed them down to 24 frames per second. I know that's probably a little bit confusing, but that's the gist of it. So the rule of thumb is whatever your frames per second is set to in your camera, you want your shutter speed to be double that number. So if I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, my shutter speed should be around 1/50th of a second. If I'm shooting at 60 frames per second, my shutter speed should be double that, which is 1/20th of a second. If I'm shooting at 120 frames per second, my shutter speed should be 240th of a second. And the reason for that is when you have your shutter speed working with your frames per second, you're going to get nice motion blur. So if I'm running down the road, my hands are going to have that nice blurry hand movement that we're used to. If your shutter speed is too fast, you're going to start seeing hand movements very jittery because you're seeing every single frame. And so that's where we get to the technical side of GoPros. If you want to do that, to try to make the video the best that you can and look the nicest, you're going to have to go into your settings. Most GoPros are the same, but just figure it out for your own. Now what happens when I do that, when I'm manually controlling this, if it's really bright outside, it's going to be completely blown out. You'll see no detail because I have the shutter speed so low, it's letting too much light in. And so that is where these little sunglasses come in, and then you snap them on top, and now it took some of that light and reduced it, so now I can use the correct shutter speed with my frame rate and still have the right exposure. Definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's definitely something you need if you plan to take your videos to the next level. I'm going to have links below. I would definitely recommend Polar Pro. And these are basically different levels of darkness. So there's 3 different levels and you just snap them on the front and you're good to go. But if you don't really care about all that, you just want to run and gun, just set it on automatic and let GoPro do the work for you. Some people might not even really notice the difference with the higher shutter speed. It all depends. But now I'm going to play a video clip of when we went to the farm show. I only filmed on the GoPro Hero 8, so you kind of get an idea of what the audio sounds like, what type of video it's taking, and so on. So I hope you enjoy. We'll see you in the next video. Bye! So tonight we're going to the Harrisburg Farm Show. So I thought, why not talk about a GoPro and show you the kind of vlog you can make with a GoPro. They're handy little cameras. They're virtually indestructible. So if your toddler gets a hold of it, not a big deal. They're so stress-free. I mean, they just fit in your pocket and you just really don't have to worry about much. You just point and shoot and away you go. And you have such a super wide angle view. Like, look at my hand. The thing I love about wide angle, the closer my hand gets, the bigger it looks compared to me. Little bit of perfume because, hey, we're gonna go be hanging out with pigs, so. What are you gonna go see?
These are some horses.
Horses.
There you go, young man.
Hey, buddy. Ready? Xander's getting a ride on a tractor. He's having the time of his life. Hey, come.
What's coming out here?
Okay, let's go find Daddy. Daddy's having ice cream. Sorry. What did Dad get? Shh, don't tell. Shall we go?
Let's go.
Sure, if you don't want it.
I shouldn't drink it.
Look at this donkey, buddy. Donkey buddy. Look at that. Look at that.
Look at his big ears.
His name is Jake. I know.
Look at cow.
Careful. Yeah, see the cows? What are they doing?
Eating hay.
Are they eating hay? And we need to get a cow, huh? Oh, come over here. Look, is it like Cletus? Oh, he's sleeping. Yeah. Yeah, we should get back out.
Oh, look at these ones. Oh,
They're dirty. That was pretty. What's he saying?
Goodbye.
Okay.
Look at this one.
That one. What did you hear? Should we go look at him? Oh, big old goose. What's he doing?
Look at that big turkey.
Oh, look at him.
I'm dying, but you actually get off.
This is the big one.
So when you come to a farm show, there's two kinds of people here. You have your people from the city, and they're basically here just to experience the zoo. And then the rest of the people are us country bumpkins, which come because this is a way of life, and this is what we enjoy. And half of us look like we came straight out of the barn. And the other half of the country folks, you can always pick out country folks. I love coming to places like this. Just everyone comes out of the woodwork from farms, and I love the farm show. What's he doing?
Ian.
It's Ian.
What other kids are doing?
Did you touch the bunny? Yeah.
Is he getting his share of love for the day?
Oh yeah.
He's like, when can I go home? So he found another merry-go-round, and Nolan's like, shall we go look at it? And he promptly pops down. No, 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 go spin in it. Oh, man, he's getting too big.
Do you want to go look at it?
Come spin around. Look at us. Spin around it. Yeah.
No, you want to go look at it?
Come in it.
Okay.
Ready, Bubba? Hold on. I think we're spoiling our son today. Here he comes. Hey, Bubba. Trying to decide if there's any other 2-year-olds on a horse on by themselves. Here he comes. Hi. Did you have fun? Really? We're doing bubbles?
Excuse me.
I think we should. Oh, okay.
Mommy.
I think we're